All right, there we go. Welcome everyone to the Solana Foundation Validator discussion, September 11th, 2025. Agenda today is somewhat light. We've got validator updates. Ashwin is here, hopefully, to give an Alpenglow update. Then we're going to be talking again about MEB Day Block 0 and open discussion. There were some topics in MB planning to talk about in open discussion, so feel free to raise them if you previously raised in MB planning. First of all, validator updates. 2.3.8 is recommended for mainnet beta, and FireDancer 708 is recommended for mainnet beta as well. That one's an important upgrade, so if you have not upgraded 708 yet, please do so as soon as possible. It's the min version on SFTP, and if you're not in SFTP, it's a security fix, so please update to 708 as soon as you can. I think last I checked it, like less than 1% of stake on 708, but if you haven't seen that yet, please upgrade. Another word of advice here, Agave 3.0 and Solana Judo 3.0 will no longer include pre-built binaries. So if your process for deploying your validator includes the pre-built binaries, please look into that immediately and get the process changed to use building from source. If you have any questions there, any issues, please reach out. The timeline for getting 3.0 to mainnet is still pretty aggressive. I think I don't recall the latest update to the schedule, but I think within about 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to be tagging a candidate for for mainnet. So yeah, again, if you do not have this capability right now, please start looking into it as soon as possible. Lastly, Agave 2.3.8 supports XDB for Turbine now. There's a blog post coming out from Onza soon that talks about the setup, but I'll also be doing some outreach to try to get some of the higher stake nodes to test out XDP now. Just for some context, XDP is a technology in Linux that allows sort of fast copy of data from the NIC to the CPU without doing a lot of copying. The XDP changes are sort of a prereq for 100 million CUs. So we want to get as many operators as possible testing this out before we potentially activate 100 million CUs in 3.0. Yeah, okay, there's a question about 708 versus 709. 708 is recommended for mainnet. 709 is recommended for testnet, but not recommended yet for mainnet. So 709 FireDancer is based on Agave 2.3, on Agave 3.0, which I'll talk about in just a second in the testnet update, but that one is still for testnet only. Any other questions there? Cool. Yeah, so now testnet, Agave 3.0.1 recommended for testnet, and FireDancer 709 recommended for testnet as well. Again, this version, if you look at the patch version, is a 3.0 release of the Agave underlying code base. So this one is testnet only. Please don't YOLO it to mainnet yet. Another announcement here, we're planning to do an all-to-all test to prepare for Alpenglow around September 22nd, the week of September 22nd on testnet. So there's some features in the 3.0 release that allows testing that's sort of intra-epoch where we can turn on and off features. So we plan to do that in testnet only the week of September 22nd. We'll send out more announcements and talk about it more, but just be aware that stability on testnet might be a little shaky that week. For SFTP, we'll likely turn off the performance requirements, and there is a chance that we could have a complete testnet outage then. So operators, just be aware, be prepared for a restart if necessary. Cool, thank you, John. Any questions about testnet or mainnet updates? So the all-to-all test is a good transition to Alpenglow. Alpenglow passed pretty unanimously. I think it was like 98% of the votes were yes. So awesome to see. Really excited to get it out there. Ashwin is here, I hope, to give an update.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, cool. All right. Take it away, Ashwin.
Cool, yeah. Thank you guys for voting. As you know, OpenGlow passed. We've been developing OpenGlow for Agave since January. So we've made a lot of progress, getting pretty close. Right now, we've been developing in a separate repository than the Agave main one, but we're at the point where we are upstreaming changes back to the main Agave client. Still, everything is gated behind a feature flag, so it shouldn't impact production at the moment. And then, as Tim said, we're still ironing out some bugs and figuring out some things like this all-to-all testing. So right now, votes are transactions in blocks. With OpenGlow, we're sending votes directly. We need to figure out the impact of doing something like that. So that's why we're going to run some tests on testnet to hopefully collect some data. And then I guess I can show you some stuff. Oh, yeah, Lucas, if you had a question.
Well, can you hear me? Yeah, now, sorry. I have a question. In what state is what you brought upstream in the, I think in the 3.0 release, I saw a feature gate. So assuming I have a private cluster and I open that feature gate, can I expect this to work, or would that just like crash and fail?
Yeah, it's not gonna work at the moment. So we are slowly in the process of upstreaming. So there's only been a couple of changes that have been upstream. The main like voting logic, all of that is still progressively being upstream. We didn't want to do it all at once so that we could get proper code review and make sure everything is correct. But yeah, we will let you know if it gets to that point where you can run your own private clusters. But for now, yeah, you won't be able to.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. And then I guess I can show you guys. So we've set up this 50 node cluster to start testing OpenGlow. So it's like a geographically distributed cluster, 50 nodes. This is running from the separate repository. So this is not Agave master. This is separate repository, which has all the OpenGlow changes. And then, we've been running it for like a week and a half now, trying to figure out bugs, hammering it with TPS. Some like notable things that might be interesting is that you can see if this loads. Yeah, like the difference here is you can see, there are actually no votes in the blocks. All of the consensus is happening off chain. We've been measuring some metrics here. Okay, yeah. So we've been measuring some metrics right now about finalization times. So in Tower BFT, it takes approximately like 12 to 13 seconds for something to be finalized, and approximately 1 to 2 seconds for something to be optimistically confirmed. Here we have some metrics from this 50 node cluster. So what you can see is this is right when the leader starts. So this is right on the leader transition, the very first block. We see the first shred is coming out in about 90 milliseconds. The votes coming out in about 530. And then we see the finalization very quickly after. So we're seeing finalization times of 120 milliseconds to 150 milliseconds, which is, yeah, obviously a huge win. So we have some decent distribution of the nodes here. Like we have some nodes in Japan, the US, Australia, but these numbers will be more meaningful once we're able to get on testnet and actually see what the real data looks like. Yeah. But yeah, that's it for me.
Cool. Any questions for Ashwin?
Yeah.
Yeah, Zan.
So in as much as possible, comparing apples to apples, this finalization is kind of represents something different than finalization in Tower BFT. Tower BFT, 12 seconds is enough time for pretty much every validator who have voted on, that particular block numerous times. In fact, however many was it 20 or however many blocks it takes to get to that point. And with this, you have essentially 80% of the validators having voted one time, which means that on a cluster failure, it's sort of a different proposition. Trying to restart the cluster when potentially only 80% of the nodes even really sort of committed to finalization at a specific point is kind of different than what we're used to, where we've all so redundantly gotten, enough blocks to, voted enough times and gotten enough sort of like history of the block to reconstruct, a snapshot at a very specific point. I mean, do you feel like if there's a cluster downtime after, 80% have finalized the block, that there's really any risk that we won't be able to recover, the cluster at that point if there was a cluster failure?
I don't think there's any risk because actually, so right now, we don't restart from finalized blocks. We restart from the latest optimistically confirmed block. And for a block to be optimistically confirmed, it has to have 2/3 of votes for that block. There's no requirement of voting on subsequent blocks. So what you're describing already happens right now. We see 2/3 of votes through gossip or in the next block or whatever, then it's optimistically confirmed, and then that's what we're going to use to restart. If anything, this is a bit stronger because it's 80% instead of 2/3. But yeah, I don't foresee any issues. And then to Brian's point, we have been testing restarts, so like individual node restarts, full cluster restarts, trying to get a hold of, get a picture into like what catch-up times are going to look like, all of these things. And yeah, when we actually do get onto testnet, like we'll do a lot of testing and baking there. So we're going to want to test the migration from Tower to Alpenglow, several times, and then do a cluster restart on Alpenglow afterwards, and try to get through all of these edge cases before we ship to mainnet.
So really, for all intents and purposes, optimistic confirmation really was finalization on Tower BFT. I mean, it's sort of satisfying the same properties as finalization in Alpenglow.
Yeah, the difference is in Tower BFT, optimistic confirmation requires at least 4.66% malicious activity to roll back. In Alpenglow, the fast finalization requires 20% malicious to roll back. So we get a stronger guarantee, and it's the same with slow finalization as well, this like 2020 model. So in that case, it's stronger. I mean, not that optimistically confirmed blocks have ever been rolled back in Tower BFT mainnet, but yeah. And then also this is faster than optimistic confirmation, right? Like if you look at OC times, it's 1 to 2 seconds because you still have to wait for the next block to be created and then the votes to get into the next block or rely on gossip. Here with the all-to-all sending of votes, you're just held back by network latency. Like how fast can I send my vote to enough stake? Yeah.
And do you track how frequently it falls back into the slower 60% path versus 80% in your testnet?
Yeah. We have a bunch of metrics and some dashboards we're looking at. We haven't run any super complicated attack scenarios. Right now we just have one of the nodes is offline, so we can test out skipped blocks. But yeah, as we upstream, we'll get access to the full suite of Agave invalidator testing attacks, and then so we'll be able to hammer it with more of the complicated like attacks and see how it performs. Yeah.
A quick question for you, Ashwin. Is there a delay for the certificates actually landing on chain? And is there an opportunity for data loss in the gap between gossiping and then actually recording it on chain?
Yeah, so the finalization certificate can be published at any time, right? So we anticipate hopefully that like the finalization, if we have a fast finalization, then in the very next block in the footer, there will be the finalization certificate. And then for rewards, we have an 8-slot delay for rewards. So 8 slots later, we post an aggregate of everyone's votes. Did they vote notarize or skip basically, if they voted at all, we're giving them a reward.
Okay.
So the question is, if the cluster dies, I guess within those 8 slots, could those rewards be lost? That is a good point, right? Like we currently persist these certificates to Blockstore, but we haven't decided fully like whether we want to do that or have some other persistence mechanism. It's not strictly necessary for liveness and safety, right? It's only a matter of like, okay, we want these rewards or we want these certificates definitely on chain. So that's something that we'll have to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just curious there. Assuming that we're booting up from a cold state from disk and there's nothing in RAM, can we properly reconstruct without losing anything? So,
yeah, it should be
cool.
It should be fine. Yeah, you don't need any prior certificates or anything as long as you are aligned on what is the restart block. That becomes effectively like the new Genesis, and then
Cool.
Question for you, Ashwin. This may be too early in the process, but have you all tested out or thought about the implementation of identity swapping?
Yeah, so I have been implementing the Hotspare like set identity stuff. We have not given it an extensive test, but for all intents and purposes, it should work the same. The difference, like kind of the things that we're figuring out right now is making sure your Hotspare that is unstaked is still able to keep up, because a lot of the communication happens between stake nodes only. So we want to ensure that, when you switch your Hotspare, your unstaked node is not like 50 slots behind or whatever. So these are some like corner cases and things that we need to test out, but we definitely would not be comfortable shipping without the identity transfer working. It's pretty crucial to have. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, is like, what are you actually swapping in that case? Because you're not copying over the tower anymore. Is there any like state you have to copy?
Yeah, so there's kind of like a tower equivalent, which is we call it the vote history, which just keeps track of your recent votes. So it keeps track of every vote that you've cast since the latest finalized block. This is still useful because there are like slashable offenses here, right? Like you can't vote, notarize, and skip for the same block. So if you were to somehow restart and you need to remember that, okay, I voted notarize for this block, like I can't vote skip for it, and things like this. So we do need to have some sort of voting history, and it'll be the same process. Like you need to transfer this between your Hotspare or between your main validator and your Hotspare. Yeah. Yeah. Chain flow.
Yeah. Will the ability to detect the slashable events carry through to the AlphaGo implementation?
Detect your own, or like just detect in?
No, like we're talking about the ability to detect on-chain those slashable events.
Yeah.
In that SIMD that is either implemented or soon to be implemented.
Right.
Will that same ability carry through?
Yeah. So the voting is different. So all of the voting violations need to be implemented for the detection for voting violations need to be implemented for AlphaGo. But it's a lot simpler. Like it's a lot easier to catch AlphaGo slashing violations versus like lockout and those things. So we should be able to, after AlphaGo launches, put something together for that. And then the leader violations, like submitting duplicate blocks, the leader pipeline has more or less not changed in terms of the actual submission of blocks. So that should all be reusable as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Ashwin?
Ashwin, I had a question. Have you guys run sort of the scenario, what happens when someone's delaying their blocks? I know that's kind of like, maybe it's more the invalidator stuff you're talking about, but I would be curious kind of what happens if 1, 2, 3, or 4 of that 50 validated cluster was significantly delaying blocks. Kind of, do we see the skips as expected, or or are they, where's that line where sometimes they're skipped, sometimes they're not?
Yeah, so we haven't intentionally run this attack, but accidentally triggered it a couple of times, and yeah, it's what you would expect. So there's a bit of a buffer given for the first leader slot because it's the handover. But for every other leader slot, it's pretty strict in the 400 millisecond timing. And so if you submit a large block or like slow block or whatever, then some portion of the cluster votes skip, right? If enough of them vote skip, it's definitely skipped. If it's like a 50-50, then the decision is deferred to the next leader, and the leaders will always, in such a scenario, the leader would prefer to skip you, right? Like if you have a choice between skipping the previous leader or not, then you're always going to pick the skip. So to say it more succinctly, yes, submitting slow blocks will get you skipped. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so like, and does it skip? So let's say you slow your second block, but all the other three blocks would be the same. Like, do you end up getting just that second one skipped, or is if I recall, is it you get basically everything after that second one skipped? It's just like skip you completely at that point.
Yeah, anytime you vote, pretty much anytime you vote skip, you're voting skip for the block and any other blocks in the window. So if you submit like one good block and then your second block is malicious, it takes too long or whatever, then it's highly likely that your third and fourth block are also going to get skipped. That makes sense.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Intentionally skip your own block. What do you mean by this?
Sorry, I just meant that if you had a slow block and then you recognized it and decided to self-skip by chaining off of the previous block, then you presumably your subsequent blocks wouldn't be skipped because they'd be part of a valid, sequence of blocks that didn't have any block overrun.
Yeah, the changing the parent is only allowed for the first block in your leader window. So it would be hard to do this profitably, I think. But yeah, if you change your parent in the first block, that's allowed. But in the second, third, and fourth block, you can't do that. Yeah. Oh,
so you no longer reference the block hash of the prior block. It's assumed now or something like that? You're always chaining off of your prior block when you're a leader, like by definition?
Yeah, when you're a leader, like your first block is the only one with the choice of who to chain off of, and then your second, third, and fourth are consecutive chained off each other. Yeah.
So if you didn't chain off of them, it would just be an invalid block at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Like everyone would vote skip. Yeah. Cool.
All right. Thank you, Ashwin. Very helpful, very interesting. That is all we have for planned content. I know there were a couple topics in MB planning that people wanted to discuss, so anyone wants to bring them up now? Oh, sorry. I do have one quick update before that. So a reminder that MEV Day is December 9th, 2025, and Block Zero is December 10th. I know Brian is here. You want to give any context or updates? And I think Chris left the link for speakers.
Yeah, Chris left the speaker link, so we're still looking for speaker submissions. Even if it's just a topic, like, hey, I'd love to hear somebody talk about this topic. That's extremely helpful, so we know what kinds of things to prioritize. And then otherwise, the sign-up links will get posted into the chat, so you can just click through to sign up. We've not yet admitted really a lot of people. Our philosophy there, I guess, is that we want to make sure we get all the validators in the room. And if we fill up too early, then we don't have room later if a validator signs up late. This does sound a lot like block building, doesn't it? So we don't want to fill the block immediately in case some good stuff shows up later. And so we're kind of playing that a little bit. But please get signed up. Make sure that your registration doesn't look like totally anonymous. We kind of need to know who you are, and that you run a validator. So please get signed up. Let's see, Lucas, you just asked, did we already let in validators? No, not yet. We're just kind of waiting till we get as many people signed up as we can, and then we'll go through and start picking through them. Also, this is the reminder, don't leave this until the last minute. Don't sleep on it, because once we fill up, we're done, and there won't be any last minute signups. So I hope that induces maximum FOMO and everybody signs up now. And we're looking forward to an absolutely amazing event. So that's the same for both events, by the way, both MEV Day and for Block Zero. Same philosophy.
Let me drop the links.
Oh, people are saying, okay, I've signed up, I haven't heard back yet. They've been pending. Okay, yeah, I get it. But if you're a validator, we'll make sure you get in. You can make your plans accordingly.
Yeah, and Block Zero has filled up every other year, so I wouldn't try to plan on it not filling up.
Correct. And every year we get people last minute saying, hey, do you have room for me? Can you get me in? This year I think the answer might be no, like we won't be able to get you in. So
just adding a reminder about breakpoint as well.
I think it's appropriate to announce the happy hour.
What happened?
Yeah, go for it, Chris. Yeah,
I think I already did, but yeah, it looks like this year will be the first year we're having an after event too. So keep an eye out for an official Block Zero happy hour happening after Block Zero. In response, it seemed like last year we tried to do something where everybody would go to the official breakpoint happy hour, but it seemed like people wanted to keep things going among the validators last year. So this year there will be an official happy hour after Block Zero. So keep an eye out for that too.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so that's all the planned content. Is there anything people want to discuss? One topic that was brought up in the channel, which I know that there's been some back and forth about, is kind of the governance and how it relates to the SIMD process, and if SIMDs should be finalized before they're voted on, or if SIMDs should be voted on at all, if we should have some different process for voting. So I'm curious what people's thoughts are there. I have my own, but I want to hear the communities.
Could you go ahead, Zen?
I mean, I think that maybe it's case by case. I don't like hard and fast rules saying we should only ever do it this way. I mean, we're a sort of organic and collective that's kind of moving through this space, and we will realign and redirect as we need to. I have no problem with any of the SIMDs that have been voted on thus far and how they've been voted on. I think that to some degree, voting is a signaling mechanism to just show the direction that we all believe we should be going, which then informs, development to make sure that they stay, within that same, channel going forward. And I think that's fine. That's my thought.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of carry on with that thought, because we're all builders on this call, right? And the worst thing that any of us could do is waste time or money building something that nobody wants. And so, if this is a good signaling indicator, for to say, hey, Anza, don't waste your time on that thing, I presume that there's value in that. And the other way to say, hey, actually, we're really excited about this direction. So yeah, just kind of following on to what Brian said, I agree. I'm sorry, Zan. Yep.
I think I'd also say that signaling, because this is a signaling vote, that the SIMDs in my mind can be less specific than I'd probably want them to be if for example, we were voting on something that would then, if that vote were to pass, would be implemented on chain without manual intervention. So I think if we ever get to a point where we're voting on things that are approved and implemented or activated without any additional human intervention, then I think the SIMDs would probably need to be more specific and than we see today. But I think with the exception of the recent Alpenglow proposal, which I do think would have benefited from additional detail, having the amount of detail that most of the SIMDs have had, especially like 123 and 228, has been sufficient, as long as there's not an automatic activation of a feature if a vote were to pass.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. And I'd also add that, I think it's somewhat of a failure case of governance if we get to the point where we're voting on actual activations on chain. I think that's a little dangerous when you only have, let's say, 40% of stake voting on something, right? I don't think that's where we want to go. And I'm sure Andrew's going to have a similar opinion. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the spirit of sort of a more veto-centric governance model where, honestly, voting to me at the signaling stage, unless there's a vocal majority or 33% at least that say no, everybody's got a chance to run the client when it comes out. And so the actual choice happens whenever they go pick which validator client they run or what code they operate day to day. So I'm very supportive of a veto-centric governance model. As I've shared many times before.
Yeah, and a veto-centric governance model isn't necessarily give anybody less power, right? It's just just gives blanket some level of trust assumptions to the people that are driving it forward, with the ability for anyone to say, raise their hand and be like, hey, this isn't the direction we actually want to go, and if enough people agree, right, that's a reasonable pull the cord moment. But I think friction, we want to always be thoughtful about friction and trying to keep the development process from being overly bureaucratic while still allowing people to make sure we don't go down the wrong direction.
Totally.
Yeah. Kind of to Tim's point. I mean, if we get all the way to implementation details and we're ready to activate a feature to find out that nobody wants it, we probably messed up pretty bad in the beginning. And hopefully would never get to that point.
Yeah, and and I know we haven't been talking about it a ton, but the new governance tooling is being built. A lot of that from the feedback of 228. I think the main thing that will be different from the existing systems is just a way to actually for stakers to actively override validators. So it is not just a validator vote, although it will always primarily be, because they will have the first sort of rights they'll be by default delegated all of their stakers voting power, and we know that a lot of stakers are nowhere near as active as validators, but there may be important stakers that want to have their voice heard, and they definitively can in the new system.
Yeah, a representative democracy with an override sounds like something we could use in real life too.
Yeah. So
yeah, one other point that's worth pointing out there, in the new voting tooling as well, there's a ability to, or a requirement to have a certain amount of support before a proposal goes to vote.
Yep.
So depending on that level of support, that can kind of act as do we care enough to vote about this or not?
Yeah.
I think the community has to decide kind of how large we make that stake percentage.
I think the default I had in mind was 10%. I'm absolutely open to that being whatever number makes sense. I don't want any one validator to be able to just automatically make something go to vote. So I think it's important for it to be north of 5%, and ideally significantly north of 5%. But I don't want it to be so high that it's just putting something to vote is just as hard as actually getting the vote out, right? Or getting people to actually vote. So 10% seems like a good number. If someone thinks 10% is not a good number, please feel free to influence. I'm open to other ideas, but that's the number I had in my head, and has and talking to people, it's been generally agreed upon. But like if someone disagrees, please speak up. Let me know. We'll talk about it.
I would just off the top of my head, like depending on current stake distribution, if three validators got together, three highly staked validators got together and wanted to put a proposal out there, it's probably a pretty good filter that it's worth taking seriously. So I don't know where that 10% sits today with the stake distribution.
I think that's right there. I haven't seen the latest numbers, but I think you might need 4, if I recall, to get to 10%.
Yeah, like 3 to 5, I think. At least off the top of my head, feels like the right range.
And then realistically, what would happen is I think you get maybe one big validator, but you could do it, like ideally you can do this without any of the big validators. So that's also why 10% is kind of nice. You could get a bunch of people banding together and reach 10% without an insane amount of difficulty. It's not a huge bar.
Yeah.
But this does make the default in this situation for everything to be a pass. And so if someone's like, hey, this needs to be a vote, then there's kind of an on-chain way to signal that this needs a vote, as opposed to loud voices. So and that's kind of the intention. Still all signaling. So like people can still ignore. People could refuse to use the tooling to vote. Like there's nothing forcing anyone to use the signaling system, but the foundation is putting together just a way for voices to be organized and heard. And our hope is that the community finds it useful and uses it. But it's like there's nothing we can do to make people do it. Same thing with the existing voting process. There's nothing we can do to force people to send tokens to an account.
One thing that I mentioned when we got together during Accelerate, without going too far down the hole here, I guess, but when I was voting last time, I again found myself wishing that there's a way to handle those vote tokens without having to touch my validator keys.
Yes.
So if there's a way to bind a governance key to the validator account.
There will be in the future. The MVP of this next governance, there won't be. I think it's going to default to the identity account as the signing account. But I don't see like we could put we could have a way where that account can sign a transaction that like once to show, hey, like for this governance and future governance, I'd like to delegate my voting power signature to this key, and then that can be your governance key. That seems really reasonable to do. I am trying to focus this tooling to be as MVP as possible and still be the right thing. So that one was dropped, but as a definitive nice to have and could easily be on the second iteration.
Okay.
All right. Does anyone else have topics or anything in chat? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I can say some words about inclusion delays if you're interested.
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't prepare anything, but some quick words. Yes, I made some measurements that show the average inclusion delays. That is the time between the validator receives a transaction and the time where it includes the transaction in a thread and broadcast it. And today it's quite long. So I think it may be interesting that at least to ask the question if this is an issue or not. Do we have to address this or not? I'm fine with both answers, but I think that many users want to have some subslot delays between their sending the inclusion. And we all want that Solana stays some chain with very efficient, very quick, and which is very efficient. And I fear that we can lose some users if we stay with such long inclusion delays. Right? So in effect, today, when someone sends a transaction, when I say send, it's using the native protocol by Quick or standard RPC. It is usually included 200 or 300 of milliseconds after that. So do we have to address? Yes.
I'm curious. So you're saying the main concern is I send the transaction and it, on average, doesn't get included for 200 to 300 milliseconds later. Is there any breakdown on like version or basically I'm wondering if you've looked at what you think the cause may be, or if it's
the cause are known. I can tell about them. When using stock agave, these delays are quite short, maybe 2 or 3 tenths of milliseconds. These delays are increased by the use of digital relayers first, and now more and more by the fire dancer packing strategies that does something similar and postpones the transactions until the very end of the block.
Yeah.
So maybe it's fine. Maybe it's a prerogative of validators to do so. Maybe it's not. And so if it's not, how can we address this?
That's a broad question that I think is really important to answer over time. I think it's one of the, at least from my purview, one of the foundation's like top priorities is like transaction landing reliability. I think is like a good number to see like what is the user experience of Solana. So that number needs to continually go down and be quicker over time. There are some fundamental issues like leaders delaying their blocks, leaders delaying transactions intentionally that with the current protocol as it's set up, you basically can't get around, at least not in code. It is a choice by the leader. So sometimes that solution looks like some of the stuff we're trying to do with Alpenglow, and also more future solutions can look like multiple concurrent leaders and just shorter block times, right? So if you half the block times, then the amount you can delay within that block decreases. And if you have multiple concurrent leaders, if you delay the transaction, maybe that transaction is actually going to multiple leaders, and then that transaction becomes invalid by the time you post it, and so you lose that transaction fee. So like competition will increase this naturally. The current situation we have right now can lead up to 400 milliseconds, even if all the software is right. Now, there's also all sorts of software between you and the block leader that can be optimized. That certainly isn't in all scenarios. I'm sure with Brian at Triton or anybody operating an RPC service can understand. There are a lot of variables that go into that. They are important, and we're trying to solve them. And you're kind of noticing an unoptimized problem that we do think is valuable to solve.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be clear, what you're pointing out there is like expressly how the revenue scheduler works, right? So like I think operators should be aware at least that is what they're doing when they're running the revenue scheduler. It waits for GTO bundles, and then at the very end of that 400 millisecond window, it schedules as much of the transactions as it can all at once. And that's happening within the last, I think, 50, 60 milliseconds of that 400 millisecond window. So it's by design. And I think the real way to fix that problem is to make so much transaction flow and activity that model doesn't work anymore, right? If you just literally can't pack all the block within that 50 milliseconds, then you have to start packing earlier, and that strategy doesn't work any longer.
Yeah, especially start pairing that with shorter block times, then right, like you kind of attacking that from both sides.
Yeah. Andrew, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think it's almost preferable that priority fee preference is tolerated within like a given slot, because you can also imagine in this sort of world where you wait to see if there's a more profitable transaction to include, you're sort of actually making local fee markets a reality, whereas for the longest time, local fee markets were sort of a maybe. And so if you can imagine, it's no longer advantageous for people to spam to get their transaction included, and instead they're expressing their preference with a fee. And so if that fee preference is sort of the highest fee preference within that 400 milliseconds for that given account state, that should be, in my opinion, like the ideal transaction to be included. So there's a bit of this that's like, if you try too hard to include too quickly, you are creating like an outsized incentive to spam, and then there's like downstream impacts of that, and there's games that are played and are sort of suboptimal. This is all. I love this topic though. It's a fun one.
Yeah, I'm also just curious in terms of how you're measuring this. Like, are you sending a transaction and then looking for that shred to show up afterwards?
Yes, we send many transaction, and we measure the time we send it, and we measure the time of the reception of the thread that contains the reception, the transaction. The difficulty is to estimate the time that does not interest you. That is the time between the sending of the transaction and the reception by the leader. This is quite easy to measure. It's a kind of uncertainty to remove. But then we have also to remove the time between the emission of the thread and the reception of the thread. This is much more complicated because of how turbine works. But we have tried to do something more or less working, and I think the results are, in average, quite precise. And I may put the link on the chat for someone that is interested.
Thank you for sharing that. Any more thoughts on this topic? Otherwise, it looks like Max has a different topic. Okay, go ahead, Max.
Yeah, hey guys. So this is kind of a topic for Tim and Ben about SFTP. Just thinking about the future when we do have SIMD 123 implemented, and even now, because GDO's allowed priority fee sharing through their tip router, but the SFTP validators, they can run 5% voting fee and 10% tip fee, but they're probably not going to want to share priority fees because that's like most of their revenue currently. So I'm just wondering if you guys are anticipating like SFTP kind of taking more of a like total combined revenue view when it comes to validator fees, so that potentially validators could, like, for example, raise their voting fee beyond 5%, and then they could share like more priority fees with their stakers if they choose to do so.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, especially with 123 out. The problem with sort of doing this before with just the GDO tip router is most stakers don't know about that situation, and it creates this kind of weird, I don't know, it creates a weird world where like right, like if you're sharing 100% of your block rewards, like most stakers aren't going to know that's even happening. They don't even know that it's even possible, let alone that some people are doing it and others aren't. So I think, at least as for the delegation program's concern, we probably won't make changes to the delegation program until like there's a in protocol way to share block rewards, especially to trying to like avoid sort of enshrining more than we have to that's outside the protocol. And the other thing to keep in mind too is the delegation program. Its intention is to become less critical and less important to the validator set over time. It has shrunk a lot over the last 24 months. It'll continue to shrink, both in size and total stake. And the sort of end state of the delegation program will look a lot more like an incubator and a lot less like a persistent stake, like subsidy or stake amount to everybody. So it'll be important that it shouldn't matter what the foundation allows or doesn't allow, because most validators shouldn't really be reliant on the foundation, and like we're going to be continually marching in that direction. So that's kind of like two ways to sort of answer that question.
Yeah, it makes sense. And, we're still super early. I don't know when SIMD 123 is going to be implemented, but I think it'll be pretty interesting seeing what happens after that.
Yeah, but we would definitely adjust. I would love to like basically allow people to find the right mix for themselves. And I think would make sense to have some sort of equation such that as long as there's like it might be a little bit tough with block awards that are changing all the time, but I would like to have a way where if you're giving away a substantial portion of your block rewards, then you could charge a little bit more on the stable inflation amount.
Yep, thanks.
All right. We're pretty close to time, so might as well end it there. Everyone remember to go to the Validator community call in 2 weeks and yeah, sign up for Block Zero and MEV Day. See y'all soon. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye bye.
Hey.